In the superconscience, beyond our present level of awareness, are included the higher planes of mental being as well as the native heights of supramental and pure spiritual being. The first indispensable step in an upward evolution would be to elevate our force of consciousness into those higher parts of mind from which we already receive. But without knowing the source, much of our larger mental movements, those especially that come with a greater power and light, the revelatory, the inspirational, the intuitive, on these mental heights, in these largenesses, if the consciousness would succeed in reaching them or maintain and center itself there, something of the direct presence and power of the spirit, something even, however secondary or indirect, of the supermind could receive a first expression, could make itself initially manifest, could intervene in the government of our lower being and help to remold it. Afterwards, by the force of that remolded consciousness, the course of our evolution could rise by a sublimer ascent and get beyond the mental into the supramental and the supreme spiritual nature. It is possible without an actual ascent into these at present superconscient mental planes, or without a constant or permanent living in them, by openness to them, by reception of their knowledge and influences, to get rid to a certain extent of our constitutional and psychological ignorance. It is possible to be aware of ourselves as spiritual beings and to spiritualize, though imperfectly, our normal human life and consciousness. There could be a conscious communication and guidance from this higher, more luminous mentality and a reception of its enlightening and transforming forces. That is within the reach of the highly developed or the spiritually awakened human being. But it would not be more than a preliminary stage. To reach an integral self-knowledge in an entire consciousness and power of being, there is necessary an ascent beyond the plane of our normal mind. Such an ascent is at present possible in an absorbed superconscient, but that could lead only to an entry into the higher levels in a state of immobile or ecstatic trance. If the control of the highest spiritual being is to be brought into our waking life, there must be a conscious heightening and widening into immense ranges of new being, new consciousness, new potentialities of action are taking up as integral as possible of our present being, consciousness, activities, and a transmutation of them into divine values, which would effect a transfiguration of our human existence. For wherever a radical transition has to be made, there is always this triple movement: ascent, widening of the field and base, integration in nature's method of self-transcendence.
Very, very beautiful para, where he explains so many things so clearly. So we'll have a look at what he says. Only we have to interpret the words. Once we understand what he means by superconscious, what he means by passiveness, what is meant by inactivity, all these things we'll see very clearly. Okay. So remember, this chapter is towards the sevenfold knowledge. And he has told us that there are ignorances. Psychological ignorance, time ignorance, we don't know our past lives, we don't know from where we have come, we don't know absolute ignorance, we don't know that we have come from the divine. So he is discussing all these things. And he has told us, first of all, that we are the whole universe. The individual is the whole universe. He is the, below him, he is the subconscious and even the inconscious. There is an universal inconscious and subconscious, and you are part of that. Okay, so you are part of that. Just like one tree, one mango tree is part of all the mango trees. So you are part of that universal subconscious and inconscious, but also universal intraconscious and also universal superconscious. He has spoken earlier in the paragraphs about the subconscious and the intraconscious. He is trying to find out where is the knowledge starting and where is the ignorance ending. Okay. So he has examined the subconscious. He has also told us about the intraconscious and very interesting phenomena. And then now he is discussing the superconscious. You must remember the context. Okay, so this is the context. So now the superconscious. What is the superconscious? It is level 2 of the spiritual planes of consciousness above our body-mind life. And this level 2 ends at the overmind level. According to Sri Aurobindo, according to the others, there is not this clarity and separation of all the planes. Even in the Upanishads. Okay? Only in the Gita it is very clear, the Akshara Purusha level 1, Akshara Purusha level 2 and Uttama Purusha level 3. So these 3 levels constantly we have to keep in mind, and Sri Aurobindo is also very, very clear about it. Level 1, you have body, mind, life. Matter, principle of life, principle of mind. Level 2, Akshara Purusha. These spiritual planes of consciousness, where there is no movement at all. The consciousness is static. Okay? Then level, and it is static and it has no power to change the lower. And normally, as I told us in this para, when you go there to level 2, normally you lose your consciousness of the spiritual, of the physical world. You go in a trance. If someone looks at you, they'll feel that you are sleeping. Actually, you are not sleeping, you are fully awake, but in the higher planes, not in the physical world. Then level 3. Okay, so superconscious includes level 2 and level 3. Okay, everything above the body mind level. Now he is discussing it. In the superconscious, beyond the present level of awareness, which is the present level of awareness, body mind life, up to mind maximum, not higher than that, are included beyond the present level, are included in the higher planes of mental being. Which are these higher planes? Not very clearly enunciated in the Upanishads, but very clearly enunciated in Sri Aurobindo's philosophy. The higher mind, 4 planes. Higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, overmind. They are the spiritual planes of consciousness. In the superconscious, beyond the present level of awareness, are included the higher planes of mental being, as well as the native heights of supermental and pure spiritual being. So, as well as the native heights, he is talking of level 3, native heights of supermental and pure spiritual being. No ignorance there at all. Okay? The first indispensable step in an upward evolution would be to eliminate our force of consciousness into these higher parts of mind. Higher parts of mind, the spiritual planes, level 2. Okay? Higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, overmind. Very clear. From which we already receive, but without knowing the source, much of our larger mental movements. Okay? Those especially that come with a greater power and light, the revelatory, the inspirational, the intuitive. So, these 3 words also we'll discuss very clearly. But now what Sridhar is saying is, if you are already receiving, and you are receiving from where? You are receiving from the subconscious, that is discussed earlier. You are also receiving from the intraconscious. Okay? Whatever you have been in your past life is stored in the intraconscious, and it is coming into you, trying to influence you. But you are, and it is influencing you to a certain extent, but you are unconscious of it. Okay? So, then finally now he is talking of the superconscious. And in the superconscious, there are 3 powers, he said. Okay? Revelatory, inspirational, intuitive. He has not mentioned the 4th. Okay? The 4 powers of the supermind are revelation. What is revelation? Drishti, spiritual sight, without the organs of sight, without the organs of senses. The inspirational, so those terminology, inspirational means the hearing. Okay? So the seeing, revelatory, the hearing, inspirational, and the intuitive. intuitive plane of consciousness is included in the spiritual planes, but actually it comes from the supermind. The supermind has got 4 powers. He is not mentioning the 4th one. I'll tell you what it is. Revelation, inspiration, intuition, and discrimination. Discrimination. To be able to make the difference between different things. The subtlest of differences you are able to make out. Okay? All these are coming to you, but when they are coming into your consciousness, they get distorted and diminished. Okay? So that's what he's saying. But without knowing the source, they are coming into you, but without knowing the source. Much of our larger mental movements, larger, not ordinary mental movements. Okay? Ordinary mental movement, I have to go to the dining room to get my food. Okay, I have to go to the market to get something. These are all normal mental movements. But larger movements, you are thinking of the principles of existence. These are the larger mental movements, not connected with practical life. Those, especially, that come with a greater power in life, the revelatory, inspiration, intuition. On these mental heights very clearly, again, level 2, spiritual planes. Okay? In these largenesses, if the consciousness, our normal consciousness, could succeed in reaching them or maintain and center itself there, something of the direct presence and power of the spirit, something even, however secondary or indirect, of the supermind could receive a first expression, could make itself initially manifest, could intervene in the government of our lower being, body-mind life, and help to remold it. So if you go to the spiritual planes of consciousness, you can receive these things and it can help you to remold it. But there are problems. He is discussing the problems now. Okay? Afterwards, by the force of the remolded consciousness, what do you mean by remolded consciousness? We have ego, attachment and desires. So when the consciousness is remolded, largely the ego will disappear largely. Your desires will not be there in your consciousness, but they will be there in the body-mind life. And the attachments also will continue to remain, but your consciousness has gone up. Okay? You can remold it. The course of our evolution could rise to a sublimer ascent and get beyond the mental into the supramental and the supreme spiritual nature. Okay? Here the word supramental very clearly meaning level 2. Supramental. Because he is mentioning supreme spiritual nature. Supreme spiritual nature is the highest level. It is possible without, now this is a very interesting point. Okay? It is possible without an actual ascent into these at present superconscious mental planes, or without a constant or permanent living in them, by openness to them. Even when you are open to them, hints and influences will come and the time will vary for everybody. Somebody may be open for 1 minute, somebody may be open for even 1-2 seconds, somebody may be open for 2 weeks, okay? Sometimes even 6 months, and then slowly it disappears. Okay? So this can happen. Without a constant of permanent living, you get the power. But if it's not permanent living, temporarily by openness to them, by reception of their knowledge and influences, to get rid of a certain extent, to a certain extent, not fully, our constitutional and psychological ignorance. Psychological ignorance, I am the inconscient, I am the superconscient, I am the interconscient, I am the superconscient, and I am also the circumconscient. That you understand when you go to the spiritual planes of consciousness very clearly, because you understand that you are not acting. When you go to the self, which is the lowest of the spiritual planes, the higher mind, you realize that you are not acting. It is nature which is acting in you, and you thought that you are acting. Okay? So, the psychological ignorance disappears, and the constitutional ignorance also disappears. It is possible to be aware of ourselves, okay, as spiritual beings. That means to say you realize that you are pure soul, you are self, and not body-mind life. That is meant by aware of ourselves as spiritual beings. The body-mind life are instruments given to me. It is a house in which I was living. And to spiritualize though imperfectly, our normal human life and consciousness. So even if you go to the spiritual planes, although it is not the perfect consciousness or supermental, some amount of change in the physical life can occur. That's what he's saying. Okay? Imperfectly, but some amount of change. Your attachments may become much, much less. Your desires also will be very, very diluted. All these things will happen. Even the ego, okay, your egoistic actions will also reduce. That's what I mean by imperfectly. There could be, and here is the next sentence, there could be a conscious communication and guidance from this greater, more humanist mentality and a reception of its enlightening and transforming forces. So if you go into the greater, more humanist mentality and a reception of its enlightening and transforming forces. Remember that Sevenfold achieved the higher mind level in Baroda itself. But in Pondicherry, in 1926, he rose to the overmind level. In other words, he was experiencing all the time higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, and in 1926, the overmind consciousness became permanent, not experience, permanent. Okay? Then he understood at that time that there is something higher, a third level is there, and he has to try for that. Okay? So, that is within the reach of the highly developed or spiritually awakened human being. But it would not be more than a preliminary stage. What he's saying is that level 2 is a preliminary stage only for total transformation. To reach an integral self-knowledge possible only at the third level, spiritual, supramental plane. An entire consciousness, not partial consciousness, entire consciousness and power of being, there is necessary an ascent beyond the plane of our normal mind. There to go much beyond. Such an ascent is at present possible only in an absorbed superconscious. I am adding the word only because in the beginning, that's the reason why samadhi is so important in the Raj Yoga, Jnana Yoga. It's you go into an absorbed superconscious, you lose consciousness of the physical world. This is one of the questions that Mother asked Ranga when she came here. Is it necessary to go to spiritual planes? You have to necessarily lose your physical consciousness? She said, no, it's not necessary. It happens, but it's not necessary. But usually that's what happens. A yogi first realizes the higher levels of consciousness, the spiritual planes, only when he is in samadhi, not conscious of the spiritual, for the physical world. Such an ascent is at present possible only in an absorbed superconscious. But that could lead only to an entry into the higher levels in a state of immobile or ecstatic trance. Immobile, knowledge. Ecstatic trance, bhakti. Okay? So either way, you can go into these higher planes either through knowledge or through bhakti, devotion. But you have lost the control of the physical world. You are not conscious of the physical world at all. If the control of that highest spiritual being is to be brought into our waking life, there must be a conscious heightening and widening into immense ranges of new beings. Note the word widening. Widening means heightening you are going into superconscious, and widening you are going into the intraconscious, and also to a certain extent in the circumconscious. Widening. Okay? Srila used the word widening very, very specifically. Moving laterally, your consciousness is going. But in the other yogas, the widening is not necessary. Your consciousness is going into heights, and you realize that the lower is not at all the reality. So you reject it. But Srila says if you want to have power in the physical world, you have to widen yourself. Not only heighten, but widen yourself. And afterwards you say you even digging deep, even in the subconscious. Okay? And that's the whole, like, the God's Labor poem is a description of that. Digging deep in the subconscious deep. Not only heightening and widening, but deepening. Okay? So into an immense range of new being. You become totally someone different. a new consciousness, new potentialities of action. Right now, our potentiality of action is only mind and vital. But at that time, it will become the power of the divine, the knowledge of the divine. A taking up as integral as possible of our present being is the body, mind, life, consciousness, activities, a transmutation of them into divine values, which would effect a transfiguration of our human existence. So in the spiritual planes of consciousness, a certain amount of transfiguration takes place. But the total transformation, integral as he's saying, is possible only at the third level. And third level also, not experience, but living permanently in that consciousness. Then a transfiguration, total transfiguration is possible. For wherever a radical transition has to be made, there is always this triple movement. Ascent, widening of field and base also. No. So here is including the material world also, the subconscious and the inconscient. Ascent, upward, superconscious. Widening, interconscient and circumconscient. Of field is the circumconscient, the physical universe. And base is the subconscious. Integration in nature's method of self-transcendence. So if you want the integral yoga, you have to heighten yourself, widen yourself, and even dig into the subconscious. Okay? So this is a very interesting para. He has gone into great detail to explain to you. Okay? Then only a total divinization of your normal human life in the physical world is possible. And others are not worried about it, as I said. Okay, the Buddhists are not worried about it. The consciousness is now gone into the spiritual planes, and that's enough for them. Because the body mind life, they are not interested. But Sridhar is interested because he wants evolution to go to the next stage. Okay, that's right. So, it is 28, we have only 2 minutes more. But it is a paragraph which was very interesting. And we also started a little late today because of the team and the Skype. Anyway, most of us have got the teams from tomorrow. Next time we have to log into team. Okay, so. And now we have 2-3 minutes. Shall we read the next one? Yes, we can read the next one. Okay, it's not very big. Archana, can you read?
No, Ranga, I am in the dispensary. Yasmin, if you could.
Okay.
Yeah, Yasmin, please.
Yasmin, can you read?
Yes, please.
Go ahead. Any such evolutionary change?
Any such evolutionary change must necessarily be associated with a rejection of our present narrowing temporal ignorance. For not only do we now live from moment to moment of time, but our whole view is limited to our life in the present body between a single birth and death. As our regard does not go further back in the past, so it does not extend further out into the future. Thus, we are limited by our physical memory and awareness of the present life in a transient corporal formation, but the limitation of our temporal consciousness is intimately dependent upon the preoccupation of our mentality with the material plane and life in which it is at present acting. The limitation is not a law of the spirit, but a temporary provision for an intended first working of our manifested nature. If the preoccupation is relaxed or put aside, an extension of the mind effected, an opening into the subliminal and superconscious, into the inner and higher being created, it is possible to realize our present existence in time as well as our external existence beyond it. This is essential if we are to get our self-knowledge into the right focus. For at present, our whole consciousness and action are vitiated by an error of spiritual perspective which prevents us from seeing in right proportion and relative and relation the nature, purpose and conditions of our being. A belief in immortality is made so vital a point in most religious because it is self-evident necessity if we are to rise above the identity with the body and its preoccupation with the material level. But a belief is not sufficient to alter radically this mistake of perspective. The true knowledge of our being in time can come to us only when we live in the consciousness of our immortality. We have to awaken to a concrete sense of our perpetual being in time and of our timeless existence.
Okay. I beg to say, we have got still 8 minutes left. I thought it is time. It is not time. So we can go
we
to
have
the
time.
para.
We have time.
Yeah, it's 8:32 in my computer watch. So I'm reading, I think we'll be able to finish it. Any such evolutionary change. What does he mean by that? Evolutionary change of the body-mind life. Okay, evolution. Okay, not necessarily only going up into the spiritual planes and disappearing into the physical without an evolution in the physical world. This individual soul has evolved, but not the physical world. Whereas he wants the physical world. So any such evolutionary change must necessarily be associated with a rejection of our present narrowing temporal ignorance. He has spoken about the psychological ignorance. He has spoken about the constitutional ignorance. Now he is speaking about the temporal ignorance. Which is the temporal ignorance? If you remember, we don't know our past lives. We have had many, many past lives in time. Okay? But that we don't know. So that is the temporal ignorance. Temporal knowledge, okay, would be knowing our past lives. Okay? So very interesting. In one place, Mother says that she was conscious even at the beginning of creation. She said that she remembers even the beginning of the creation, which is very, very hazy, okay, when life is coming out of the matter, okay. So that is, she remembers even that, she said. Not only some one or two lives in the past. Okay. For not only do we now live from moment to moment of time, but our whole view is limited to our life in the present body, between a single birth and death. Single birth, not multiple births. Multiple births, past lives. Single birth, this life. And death. We remember only that much, and that also very imperfectly. We don't remember what we were when we were 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. I don't even remember beyond my 6 years. From 6 years onwards I can remember. But I don't remember 4 and 5. Okay? Let alone 1 and 2. Okay. As our regard does not go farther back in the past, okay? Past means he is talking of the past lives. Okay? Even the present life also, only to a certain extent the memory goes back, not more than that. So, it does not extend farther out into the future. We know nothing about the future. But if you go into the higher place of consciousness, even the future reveals itself very clearly, not only to yogis, but even to those who are not yogis. If you have a sufficiently developed, you can know somewhat to a certain extent your future. Okay? So, extend farther out into the future. Thus, we are limited by our physical memory. There is also a spiritual memory. And the spiritual memory is also all your past lives. The physical memory only to this life. And awareness of the present life in a transient corporeal formation. Not corporal. Corporal is a gradation in the army. Corporal. But there is corporeal of the body. Okay, like French word corps. C-O-R-P-S, the corps. Okay? Corporeal formation. Body. But this limitation of our temporal consciousness is intimately dependent upon the preoccupation of our mentality with the material plane and life in which it is at present acting. We are conscious only of the body-mind life. The limitation is not a law of the spirit. but a temporary provision for an intended first working of the manifested nature. Okay? This ignorance, he is saying in different words, is not something imposed on you. You can get rid of the ignorance. That's what it means. It's not a permanent state of ignorance. Whereas many others, okay, the Mayavadins and the others, think that the ignorance is permanent in the physical world. That's why they want to escape from it and reject it. But not Sevenfold. Sevenfold is saying that the ignorance in the physical world is intended. It is intended because you have to work in the physical world, okay? And there has to be meaning to the physical world. It is intended. So the ignorance is not compulsory. It is optional. You can get rid of it by yoga. If the preoccupation is relaxed or put aside, the extension of the mind effected. In other words, you worry less and less about physical and vital movements and even mental movements. Relaxed or put aside, not fully related. An extension of the mind effected, you make your mind go up beyond physical needs and into opening into the subliminal and superconscious. There you are. Subliminal, intraconscious. Superconscious, above. Subliminal, horizontal movement, widening, and superconscious, heightening. Into the inner and higher being. Again, note the words. Inner corresponds to subliminal, intraconscious, horizontal extension, and higher being, ascending. Okay? It is possible to realize our persistent existence in time, as well as our eternal existence beyond it. Persistent existence in time in the physical world, as well as our eternal existence beyond it, the spiritual planes. Part of us lives there all the time. Part of us is also divine, remember. Okay? But we are ignorant of it. This is essential if we have to get our self-knowledge into the right focus. Right now our focus is on the body-mind life, but the focus has to be on the spiritual planes and then finally in the supramental. For at present, our whole consciousness and action are vitiated. Vitiated means made impure. Okay? Vitiated by an error of spiritual perspective. He has spoken about focus. Now he uses the word perspective. Okay? By an error of spiritual perspective, which prevents us from seeing in right proportion and relation the nature, purpose and conditions of our being. Why has a soul come down into the physical world? If it wants divine nature, why on earth did it come down? So there must be a purpose for that. Okay? This is a very interesting point. It can be discussed a bit. Okay? This is what the Mayavadis and the Buddhists are not able to explain. If the intention of the soul is to live in the higher planes of consciousness, why on earth did it come down at all in the beginning? Okay? There is no purpose. But so when it has come down, there must be a purpose. It's very similar to, suppose you have to go to Madras for a particular work. Okay? You go there and do the work and come back. There is meaning in going to Madras. But if you simply go there and come back, you can be asked, why the hell did you go there? There is no work to be done. So that's what the Buddhists and the Mayavadis are doing. They are saying coming down here has no purpose. So then in that case, why was it created at all? Okay? That's a very interesting point. And there must be, that's how Sevenfold is thinking. Huh? If the world has been created, there must be a purpose to it. But the others are not seeing the purpose. They are only seeing the ignorance, the suffering, okay, death, okay, the perversions, and they want to escape from there. But there must be a purpose, and that's what Sevenfold is doing. Okay? The Gita also addresses that question. The Gita does not have the concept of evolution, but it does want you to live in the physical world with a pure being, like the lotus leaf in water, not to be affected by it. A belief in immortality is made so vital a point in most religions because it's a self-evident necessity if we are to rise above the identity with the body and its preoccupation to the material level. So in all other religions, you think you have only one life. It becomes meaningless. Why to come down at all into one life here and go back untransformed? Why at all did you come down? There's no meaning. So, if you know that your soul is immortal and it is again and again coming down to the physical world, there will be a purpose. Okay? So that's what he is saying. But a belief is not sufficient to alter radically. Belief of what? Belief of your immortality. It is not sufficient to alter radically this mistake of perspective. The true knowledge of our being in time can come to us only when we live in the consciousness of our immortality. Where is that possible? In the spiritual planes. In the spiritual planes, you realize that you are immortal, that you have always lived and you will always live in the past, in the future. The consciousness of our immortality. You realize that you are the soul and the soul has always existed. It's part of the divine. We have to awaken to a concrete sense, not a mental sense, not a feeling, but a concrete sense of our perpetual being in time and of our timeless existence. Perpetual being in time, coming down again and again into the physical world, and our timeless existence, the soul that has come down from the divine. Timeless existence. So, now it is 42 and we have done 2 paras. Next time, we'll go for immortality in its fundamental sense.